Hey team, and welcome to this video about shooting and editing photos for restaurants. So this venue is kind of designed for either in-house people, like marketing people at the venue, or if you're an agency and you're looking to add gathering content as part of your offerings to restaurants in particular. So when we started on our restaurant marketing journey 6 or 7 years ago, doing content was one of the key sort of offerings that we had. And we would fly around New Zealand and to Australia to just take food photos essentially. And then what we'd do is we'd edit those photos and then we would write copy for them and schedule them for Facebook and Instagram for a bunch of different restaurants. I think at our peak before COVID, we were doing this around 200 restaurants at a time. And it was very, very, very overwhelming. But through that experience, we learned how to essentially get content really efficiently. And what I'm going to do is we are going to head out to one of our old venues that we used to do this for. And in return for free lunch, we are going to shoot and take some photos for them. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to be taking all these photos, obviously on the camera that we're using, because that's the one that I used to use to take food photos. So most of this video is going to be shot on an iPhone, which should be fine. And I will be explaining why I'm doing certain things in certain ways so that you can go and do them for your venue or for venues that you work for. And then I'm going to dive into the computer and use Lightroom to edit these photos and sort of show you how I do that as well. So if you've got any questions, leave them down below and hopefully you love the video. Cheers.
Okay, so as we head out there, I'm just going to put up on screen the end result of this photo shoot, because what I think it does is it paints a good picture for what we're aiming for and why I'm doing things in a certain way. Also, I'm just going to chuck the camera settings up on screen as well as what camera we're using for this shoot. So one camera is the only piece of equipment that we're using for the shoot. As I do touch on, you can get lights and stuff, but I'm just doing everything using natural light.
So probably the first thing to note when you're coming into a venue is just looking at where to take photos. So you're looking for natural light is the main thing, but out of the direct light. So the problems that I can see instantly here is that you're obviously, if you're going to shoot inside, it's going to look too yellow because all the lighting's yellow. And when you go to white balance the yellow, essentially take it out and make it less yellow, then the food also, obviously you take it out there. Unless you are using Lightroom and Photoshop in certain ways, and then you can kind of make it work. And definitely I've made the mistake in photo shoots and have been able to rectify it. But ideally you're looking for white light, indirect. Daniel's got a dog with him. So another thing to look for here is all the light, or most of the light coming through this room is going to be filtered by the roof. And the roof is a bit of a bluey tone. So most of the colors here are going to be quite blue. So what I would do is I'd probably look at maybe this table here, because you're going to get natural white light coming in from that direction, and maybe it'll be a bit blue, but we'll put the phone down and see. A test that I also do is just, you don't really want any shadows. So if you're taking food here, it's probably going to be too bright. I'll take some photos of here, and then the other spot that, so yeah, potentially over in this corner as well, because you're going to get, although it might be a little bit blue, you're also going to get light, natural light coming through here. And then the other spots that I would potentially look at getting photos here would be, if you were to do it, you'd probably pick one of these tables, because there's going to be white light just coming through the window there. And these lights here won't impact it too much. So I would pick one of those spots to do it, ideally. Also, typically, when we're doing photo shoots, would typically ask for 7 to 12 dishes. That way you can get them all at once, and you would want to take them in a few different spots. So if you just take them on one table, obviously the background's just going to be the same. Sometimes I bring in a cloth as well to just chuck over the table, just so you get a different background if the lighting's only good in one spot. Otherwise, what you can also do is just put in a few different tables so you get different backgrounds, which means that you can use the same dish multiple times because there's differences between the dishes. It's obviously quite a bright day today as well, which makes it a bit more difficult. I would say like overcast days are typically the easiest when it comes to getting photos, for sure. The other thing is, don't do photo shoots at night time in the evening. It's just too dark and you're going to have to use artificial light. One thing that I know that people do, especially if they are well, main places I've seen them are, let's say you've got people coming in from Uber Eats or something to take their photos. They'll typically bring a light with them, which you can do. So you bring like a white light, which would neutralize the light, and it would obviously be diffused light as well, so it's not going to get that direct, strong light. But I haven't found too much issues just going without and making it work by just looking at the venue and finding spots which are going to be best to take photos. Okay, so once the food comes out, typically there are a few things that I look for. I will try and get at least 3 or 4 angles. They're typically a low angle, an angle at about a 45-degree angle, a high angle straight down from above, and I'll also try and get some really close-ups. The camera settings that I'm using is I use quite a shallow depth of field, and that's just because my camera allows for it, so I'm shooting at like a 1.6. But if your camera doesn't allow it, I'll just go as low as you kind of can. If it can only get to like a f-stop of 2, then that's good. It just gives a bit more, that blurs out the background a bit more, just makes it look a bit more professional. And also often there's things in the background that you don't necessarily want to be in that shot because you want the focus to be on the food. So as you kind of see, I'm just kind of going around getting different angles, and this is on the indoor table. And then what we'll do is we will, once we've got enough photos here, we'll jump to the outdoor table. One other thing to notice is just the light is coming from typically one side, and so if you can get photos from that side, that means that they're going to be better or more well lit. Okay, so now we're outside, and just because the light is a little bit brighter, actually same with inside, but when the light is quite directional, meaning that you can see all the light is coming from one side, that's typically the side that you really want to take the photos from, because the shadows are going to be cast. Even though they're not going to be super strong, the shadows are going to be on the other side, so this will get more light essentially coming from this angle, and so you typically want to take most of your photos from this side. Other things to note here is the circular dish is always going to be the easiest to take photos of, especially because we typically crop to square, and the other dishes are a bit more difficult to crop to square because it just doesn't look very symmetrical. So if you are looking to just get good looking photos, always go for the food which is in the circular dishes. It just seems to be the easiest. And then when it comes to drinks, again, I think drinks in shorter glasses are easier to take photos of. If they're in like mimosa glasses or wine glasses, can be quite difficult. The one caveat to all of this is pizza. Pizza is notoriously difficult to take photos of just because it's so flat and it doesn't really have much depth. And it just looks like pizza, So now I'm going to dive into the computer and start editing these photos. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I am going to edit these photos. So I'm just going to import them off the SD card that I used yesterday to take these photos. So there should be, how many photos are there? There's 49 photos, and there was only 3 dishes. So in the end, what we're probably going to end up with is we're probably going to end up with around 15 photos that we think are good and usable. And as you can see, when I shot the photos, I shot them in ARW, which I believe, but don't quote me on it, is Sony's RAW version. And the reason why I want to shoot in like a RAW version is just because it has, although the files are bigger, it just keeps a whole lot more data, so it's a lot more easy to color grade. Now, I'm used to color grading in large numbers of photos because typically I will overshoot, and typically I'd have multiple photo shoots in a day. And with the price that we're charging prospects, the price we're charging venues is just too hard to spend hours and hours editing photos. So typically what I would do is I would do one color grade for the outside photos, and then I'd do one color grade for the inside photos. And what's fantastic about Lightroom, and kind of why I use Lightroom, despite Adobe really being annoying when it comes to cancelling subscriptions with them, is you can just copy and paste your settings across everything. So what I would typically do is I'd find let's say an outside photo like this, and I'll do a color grade. And bear in mind, we're not trying to necessarily, depending on the venue, not trying to be on brand, we're not trying to make it look as realistic as possible. What we're trying to do is get the best results for socials, which is typically a little bit overexposed and typically a little bit oversaturated without going too much over the top. So pull the exposure up a little bit, drop the highlights, drop the blacks, and pull up the saturation just a touch. Not so it looks completely crazy, but something like that typically works well. They might even take a few more whites out of that. So I'd like that, and then I would crop something like that. There we go. I'll just put myself, where's the least annoying spot? Probably up here. And then what I'll just do is I'll just copy this, Command C, and I'll just paste it for literally
all of the outside photos. And then I'm going to go through one at a time at the end and color grade them all individually because some of them look a little bit dark. And then for inside, again, I would find a photo that I think will be easy to color grade, such as this one. Pull up the exposure, drop the highlights, drop the whites a little bit, drop the blacks. Probably too much. Something like that. And again, just bump up the saturation. But there's a lot of different color grades that you can do, but I think this is just like an easy one. Yep, and then you would this. And then again, just copy and paste this across all the indoor photos. So now that they're imported and you can kind of see them, you can see why I say like the longer flat boards are a lot more difficult to take photos of just because of the framing and everything. You end up with a lot of table space and not as much food if you're trying to get the whole dish in. Anyway, so now that I've done that, I'm going to go to the beginning and go through them and crop, adjust and delete as fast as I can, really. I'm going to crop them all to square just because that is the easiest when it comes to... Oh, is that in focus? No. Cool. So, something like this, and maybe there's a little bit too much white in there. Let's get a photo of the chips. So I would say these have been, like, the color grading didn't really make as much sense for this. So I'll bring up the blacks a bit. It's a bit better. So typically you'd have probably someone with a bit nicer, less beat up fingers holding the food. Typically you'd get one of the staff members, but all we had today was Daniel. So there we go. Delete. And now I'm just going to quickly skip through and do the rest as quick as I can. All right, there we go. We ended up with 18 photos, but they're all usable. They're all a little bit different depending on how you cut them up. Typically, again, when we do photo shoots, we'd do more than 3 dishes, and you'd probably bring out some cocktails or some other drinks to go with them, just so that you get more backgrounds. Again, if you are going to a venue that you haven't been before, I would also recommend maybe bringing like a drop cloth. When I say drop cloth, sorry, I mean like a just a sheet for the table, in case all the tables just don't work very well, or you want just something a bit different, so then you can just leave it in your car and go grab it if necessary to put down on the background. So I hope this helped provide some sort of context and some sort of explainer of how we would go out, get photos and edit these photos. Again, I've got another video explaining how I'd write all the copy for these photos in the most efficient way as possible. So again, if you are a venue, hopefully this helps you being able to do it, or if you are an agency looking for a way to provide services to local businesses, local restaurants. One of the reasons why this is super helpful to do photos is you can always deliver on them. So especially when you're starting out doing restaurant marketing, you're probably going to have a product that doesn't work very well because you haven't done it for a lot of venues. So being able to do photography alongside of it means that you can always deliver on something, and so you're not completely wasting the restaurant's time if you can under-deliver, or if you end up under-delivering on your other services, which is bringing people in through the doors. So hopefully this provided some value and answered some of your questions. If you've got more questions, leave them below. If you find this sort of stuff interesting, please subscribe. It does really help us out, and I will see you in the next one. Peace.